Hey guys, Rick Stone here from Our Stoney Acres. Welcome to our YouTube channel. It's the middle of July and this is my favorite time of the year in the garden. The tomatoes are starting to come on and the produce is really starting to come on strong from the garden. But that also means that we're starting to harvest some of those one-time plant and one-time harvest crops. So things like potatoes and onions and garlic. All of those crops are starting to come out of our garden right now, which means we have empty space. And so we need to do some mid-season planting to replace those crops and keep our garden producing. And so today we're going to talk about crops that we can plant mid-season and still dependably get a harvest before the really cold weather settles in this fall. Okay, so before we get started, let's just take a second to remind you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Make sure that you click that notification bell so you get noticed every time I release new videos. And also, please make sure you go over and follow us on Instagram, as we are really having a lot of fun over there doing some daily stuff there. And so there's a link down in the description you can click to join us over on Instagram. And then today I also need to thank our sponsor, which is Smart Pots. So we're going to be doing some planting later on in this video, and we're actually going to be using some Smart Pots to plant in those. And so I just wanted to thank Smart Pots for sponsoring this video today. All right, so this video is geared for those of us that are kind of landing in zones about 5 through 7, okay? So things will be a little bit different if you're in the warmer zones. So this video is geared for those of you that are at zones 5 to 7 really, and probably you're gonna have roughly, I don't know, 80 to 90 days until your first frost. So somewhere between October 1st and November 1st is when your first frost is coming. And that's who we're going to be trying to talk to today. So like I said earlier, your garden is probably starting to get a few empty spots right now, right? So you're just harvested your garlic. It's probably about time for you to start harvesting your onions. For us, some of our early plantings of potatoes are starting to come out. And that means we're starting to get some empty spots in the garden that we need to fill back up, okay? So there are some plants that we can be growing mid-season that will still get us a good harvest. There's not a lot for those of us in zones 5 through 7 of warm season crops left. There are a few that we can plant, but there are some crops that are kind of that in that gray area, you know, that are really kind of cool season crops but do well in the warm as well, that we can start planting now. Even though it's a little bit early to be doing our fall planting, we can do some of this mid-season planting now to kind of fill in those gaps and fill in those spaces. So let's talk about some of those plants. First off, let's talk about some of those warm season crops that we can still plant and get a harvest before the frost comes, okay? So we're really kind of getting limited on our time frame here. We maybe have, like I say, 80, 90, maybe 100 days left until our first frost, which kind of limits us on which crops we can grow. Too late for tomatoes, too late for a lot of the bigger squashes and things like that. But there are a few things that we can plant, and is what we want to be looking for is crops that have a maturity date of about 60 days, okay? So that will give us an opportunity to have a few weeks to harvest from those crops before the frost comes. So the things that I'm thinking of that are going to do well warm season crop wise are going to be things like zucchini, yellow crookneck squash, or patapan squashes. All of those, usually we're looking at about 60 days to get our first harvest from those, and so that'll give us, you know, maybe another 20 or 30 days to harvest from those plants. The other thing that will still do well this time of year is green beans, okay? So green beans, usually, especially if we choose a bush variety, are going to be about 55 to 65 days for the first harvest, and then they'll continue to be harvestable for about 30 days after that. And so those will work out really, really well for mid-season plantings also. Then we have a whole list of crops that technically are cool season crops, but are tolerant of the heat. And so remember, we're kind of working our way towards the cool weather. I know it doesn't feel like it right now. We've been 100 degrees or more here for the last couple of weeks, but cooler weather is on the horizon within the next 60 days. And so we can plant some of those cool season crops now, baby them along a little bit, and then they're going to mature just beautifully in the early fall and do really, really well. So let's talk about some of those. So first off, we have beets and turnips. So both of those do pretty well, especially beets do really well with the warmer weather. And so you can get those planted now, and they'll mature in 60 to 75 days and be just perfect to fill in that empty space in your garden. If you're interested in planting carrots, I would probably wait just a little bit longer. So carrots are like the cool weather just a little bit more, and so I would maybe hold off 2 or 3 more weeks on carrots before you really plant those. Those are kind of more of a fall crop, and we'll talk more about those here in a couple of weeks and planting those. Other crops that you could be planting now would be some of the leafy greens that like the warmer weather. So things like kale and Swiss chard and collards, okay? All of those are going to be tolerant of the warmer weather. They're cool season crops, but as the fall progresses and we get closer and closer to fall, conditions will be even better for those. And so planting some of those now will mean that they're going to be maturing just at the perfect time in the fall, okay? You can also get a few lettuces in, but you need to be looking specifically for some of the summer crisp lettuces. So these are a more heat tolerant lettuce, and I actually have some growing in this bed. Maybe I'll do a cutaway for you. But these summer crisp lettuces are varieties like Nevada, Concept, Fusion, Muir. Those are summer crisp lettuces that actually are a lot more heat tolerant, and you could be planting some of those mid-season, and again, they'll mature in about 60 days and do really nicely for the fall. And then the last thing that you can be planting here mid-season and kind of mid-summer are peas, okay? So I know peas are traditionally a cool season crop, but if you want a decent fall crop of peas, you actually need to be planting them mid-summer, okay? The reason why is peas, the plants themselves are very cold hardy and frost tolerant, but the pods that we're actually eating, the pea pods, don't like cold freezing weather, okay? So we need to get those peas to maturity right around our first frost date so that we're able to harvest those peas while it's still cool, but before it gets freezing cold, okay? So I usually like to get my fall planting of peas in somewhere between 10 to 12 weeks before my first frost, which is now, okay? So mid-July, first part of August, depending on when your frost date is when we want to be getting that fall crop of peas in. So where are we going to be planting these crops? We're going to be looking for empty spaces in our garden, places where we've either pulled out onions and garlic and potatoes and things like that, or where we've lost plants. So now is a good time to fill in that spot where the vine borers ruined your squash, or something like that. Fill in those places the best you can. Another great place for you to be planting this time of year is actually in containers. And so is what we're going to do. We have kind of a fun, unique situation in our family going on right now. One of our family members just bought a new home and they are remodeling it, and so they're not actually living in it right now, but are going to be here in about 30 days. And so is what they would like to have a little bit of a fall garden. And so is what we're going to do today is we're going to use some of the smart pots that I have, and we are actually going to be planting some crops for this family member that we can then take over to their house a little bit later. And that's really convenient with the smart pots because we'll be able to carry those over. So let's take a few minutes. I'm going to cut away and we're going to go over and actually do some planting in these smart pots. Okay, so just really quick, I'm going to be using some smart pots. This is actually for my daughter's place, and they have got just a little spot and they wanted to have a few vegetables this year, and so we're going to try a few mid-season plantings for them. So the first thing we're going to be doing is we're going to be using this big 20-gallon pot. So we're going to use this great big one to plant a zucchini in. We've got about 90 days until our first frost of the fall, and so I think we've got enough time to actually get a fairly decent harvest, and so we're going to use this great big one for that. And then we're going to use a couple of smaller ones. These are the 10-gallon pots, and we are going to be using those for some greens. We're going to do some kale and some collards and a little bit of Swiss chard, kind of a mixed green basket. And then we're going to put some green beans in, and these will be a bush variety of green beans that we're going to be putting in one of these as well. So let's get these planted. I'm going to fill these up for you, and then we'll talk just a little bit more about how we're going to take care of these pots during the rest of the summer. All right, so filling those bags up wasn't too terrible bad. I did it by myself. I think maybe it might have been a little bit helpful to have a little bit of a helper here, but the big bags stayed open really well. And I also filled up a 15-pound bag that's out of the frame, I think, for the most part, that I'm going to be using to plant some peas in as well. So not too bad to fill these guys up, and they opened right up, and they're super nice. Look at these guys. I'm super happy with these grow bags. And again, these are smart pots, and so I really like them. And they're easy to lift and move around. They've got these reinforced handles. They're going to make it easy because we're planting these right now for my daughter, who is they just bought a house and they're remodeling it currently, and so they're not living in it. So we're going to actually take care of these for the first 3 or 4 weeks here at our place, and then we're going to take them over to their place, and so they have a few vegetables. So we chose this great big 20-gallon bag to plant zucchini in, and then we're going to do some mixed greens in this one, and we're going to do some green beans in that one, okay? So really quick though, I did want to talk about soil and the soil that you should be using in your containers. So make sure that you choose a premium potting soil mix. Don't go cheap, okay? If you've got a $3 bag and a $7 bag, choose the $7 bag because you get what you paid for. You want something that's good quality and organic to be planting your vegetables in. The nice thing about this variety, that's just kind of a local variety that we have, is it also comes kind of pre-fertilized with some poultry manure and some bat guano and also some kelp meal in it, and so we won't need to fertilize immediately. But with containers, you do need to plan on fertilizing quite often. So you're going to be fertilizing way more often than you will in your regular garden. Probably every couple of weeks you ought to be putting kind of a balanced liquid fertilizer on your plants in your containers, just to make sure that they stay healthy, okay? All right, so the other thing that you probably should do is pre-moisten your soil before you're planting. But mine actually came pre-moistened because it's been rainy for the past couple of days, and so it actually worked out okay. So we're a little bit dry, but moist enough that I feel like we're not going to have any dry pockets in the container. So, but if you have a really dry mix, you'll probably want to like pour half of it in and kind of pre-moisten and then fill it the rest of the way up, okay? So let's get planting. Here is what we are going to be planting in our mid-season containers. We're going to start with some zucchini. So the maturity date on this zucchini plant is 50 days. In the fall, that's going to be a little bit longer. We're probably looking at more like 60 to 65 days before we'll get our first fruit. But this one is going to be great for a mid-season replacement plant. So we are going to, this is a big container. We want a big container because zucchini is a good sized plant. And so we're going to put in here, we're going to put about 6 or 7 seeds kind of evenly spaced out. And then is what we're going to do. We're going to put those in about 1 inch deep, and then we are going to let those guys come up, and we're going to choose the best 2 or 3 plants that actually come up and start growing. So we're going to kind of let them get up to 4 or 5 inches, and then choose the best 2 or 3, thin out the rest. And probably for this container I'll end up just leaving 2 zucchini seeds in here, and that should give us a pretty decent harvest for the end of the season, okay? And then we over here are going to be doing some green beans. So these are bush variety, and it's about the end of this package. We're going to put about 8 to 10 plants in here. So in a 10-gallon pot, that's plenty of space for us to get these beans going. So again, we're just going to kind of evenly space these out. Nice thing about beans and zucchini is they're super easy to plant because you just stick them in, and they need to be about 1 inch deep, and away we go. So we'll put, I don't know, 8 or 10 seeds in here, and these guys are going to come up. Bush beans actually do pretty well kind of close together, and so they should do well in this container, no problem, no worries there, okay? And then in this last container, we are going to be planting some mixed greens. So I've got some collards, I've got some Swiss chard, and I've got some kale, okay? And this is kale that we actually harvested ourselves. So I'm just going to kind of pull a little bit aside here. These don't go nearly as deep, and we're just going to sprinkle a few seeds of each on here. And again, these are going to be, we're not really going to be worrying too much about these growing to full size because we're going to be harvesting them as greens, and so we can kind of compress them in here and get quite a bit in this container. So let's go over here with some Swiss chard, and then we'll put a little bit of the Vates kale kind of back here. Just a few seeds. If we need to, we'll thin them out, but again, we just want to kind of get a good planting in here so that we have a nice thick container full of greens that we can kind of be harvesting from. Okay? All right. So next we're going to water these guys in, and then we are all set with our smart pots for our mid-season planting. So I will do a follow-up video for you guys here in maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks, let you see what they look like, and maybe we'll do another follow-up in the fall where we can actually harvest. But I wanted to just make sure that you guys were aware that you shouldn't be leaving space open in your garden. There's plenty of things that you can be planting mid-season like this. Get them in either in containers or out in your garden itself, and they will be a great addition to your late summer and fall, early fall crops. Okay? All right. That, my friends, is all that I have for you for this week. Again, thank you to Smart Pots who sponsored this video. If you're interested in getting a Smart Pot, I love these colors. We chose kind of these vibrant colors, and it's going to add some pop to my daughter's yard, and we've got some that we're going to be planting in the fall here in our yard as well. So great colors for you. They're super strong. The smaller pots have the handles built in. The larger ones have these reinforced handles so that you're able to quite easily move things around. So look, I mean, this is stout, but it's pretty easy for you to move around, and you can move them based on, you know, time of year and what's going on. We're actually going to throw these in the back of a car and take them over to my daughter's place here in about 3 weeks. So super convenient for that. They're made in the USA. They're BPA and lead free as well. So great pots, and I would recommend take a look. There's a link down in the description that you can click on for Smart Pots and go, you know, try them out, because it's a great addition to your garden. Okay. All right. That's all I have for you for this week, guys. Thank you. Get some mid-season planting done. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and go follow us over on Instagram. Okay? Thanks. Happy gardening, guys.